Welcome to COM 110. I'm your professor this semester, Tricia Beckham, and I'm going to keep these videos for the semester to about 15 minutes. Sometimes they will be shorter, but they'll never go over 15 minutes. The only way you'll be able to get the material for your assignments and quizzes is to actually watch these videos, so you don't want to skip them. Otherwise, you've got no way to know what the material is that I expect you to know and apply in your assignments, and also what you'll be tested on for the quizzes. If you ever have any questions about what I say during these video lectures, just send me a message. Sometimes it's helpful that when you do that, it's earlier in the week, so then I can post a reply, and students that are watching it later in the week, they will benefit from my response and benefit from you asking the question. So help each other out in that way if possible. All right, let's get started. We're just going to try to understand a little bit about interpersonal communication. So the first question that we're going to ask ourselves is, why would we study interpersonal communication? What's the big deal? Well, interpersonal communication is about the communication we engage with another person. Most of the focus of this semester is going to be based on a dyad. That's D-Y-A-D, dyad. And that's two individuals. Two people is a dyad. Two people interacting is really how interpersonal communication is best witnessed. Now, in a family, for example, you may have 3 or 4 people in your family, but there are some attributes of interpersonal communication when, say, a son is talking to his mom or a daughter is talking to her father, because those are 2 people. And so even if there's 2 other people in the room, there's some elements of interpersonal communication. But if all 4 of you are discussing what you'd like to do for a family vacation, that has a tendency to emulate more of a small group communication type of phenomenon. So there are some differences, there's some similarities, but most of the time when I'm describing something, it's between 2 people. So try to keep that in mind when I present examples and when you're trying to apply the material that I'm teaching you. Why is interpersonal communication so important? Well, first of all, our personal success depends on it. So my guess is you have some goals for yourself. I don't know what that would be, but some of the personal goals that I've heard students have are they'd like to get a degree. They'd like to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They would like to have friends. They would like to get a job that they like. They would like to have healthy relationships with people that care about them and that they care about. They would like to have a support network that can come through in difficult times. All of those things are personal successes that we might want to achieve. But a lot of the things I talked about could be set into other categories. Some of those are social successes. Having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, getting married, that is in essence a social success because socially you're engaging with other people. You may want to be somebody who, when you have to go to a dinner party, you're fun, you're engaging. People like to invite you places because they want you to be there. There's something about how you interact with people socially that is engaging, impressive, and makes others feel good. Professionally, if you want to get a job, that again is going to be influenced by how you can communicate in a job interview, but also how well can you keep a job in terms of how do you interact with those that you're working with, your boss, etc. So personal success, social success, professional success, a lot of those things blend and meld into one another, but certainly we all have those 3 categories of success that we would like to achieve, and interpersonal communication is the best way for us to meet some of these goals and have success in these areas. I moved my window a little bit. Sorry about that. Now we're going to talk about the nature of interpersonal communication. And these are just some attributes of interpersonal communication that are very much important to our understanding of it. Because if the communication that we're engaging in doesn't have these attributes, then you're just communicating. It's not necessarily interpersonal communication. So you're not always communicating interpersonally, right? So you have to keep that in mind, that these are some of the attributes that have to be present for it to be classified as interpersonal communication. So the first thing is, interpersonal communication typically takes place between connected individuals. So if I go to the grocery store and I am talking to the cashier, that's not interpersonal communication because we're not necessarily connected. Now, somebody might say, well, yeah, you're connected because you have to pay and she has to ring up your items and you have to interact. But really, there's no connection that's going to span any longer than the 10 or 15 minutes you're checking out. The other way that we're connected is the way that I act impacts you. So if I'm in a bad mood, that's going to influence you. If you're tired, that's going to influence the other person because maybe you're not listening well. So when we are interdependent, it means we rely on each other. We are dependent on the other person to have interaction and communication take place. Interpersonal communication basically takes place through highly connected people where the actions of the other really influence the wherewithal of the other person. The next thing about interpersonal communication, it's inherently relational, which means it defines our relationship. The way that our communication occurs influences how our relationship develops. And our communication varies depending on what our relationship is. The communication you have with your parents when you're young, say up to age 10, is much more parent-child dependent. You are very much dependent on your parents' opinion of you. You're dependent on their opinions about the world. You very much want to please them. But as you move to adolescence, you start to become less dependent on them, and so your relationship changes. When you think of the moody teenager who may not want to talk to their parents, that really shows the relationship changing and the communication changing because the relationship is changing. And then as teenagers move towards adulthood, it's more about their friendships, their social relationships, and less about their family relationships. And so the communication changes. Oftentimes it decreases. It may become what parents deem as more disrespectful, but the way that we communicate defines our relationship, and our interpersonal communication varies depending on the relationship stage or the individuals. The way you talk to your professors, much different than you talk to your aunts and uncles. The way that you talk to your friends, much different than you talk to your siblings. Okay, so those two attributes have to be present for it to be interpersonal communication. The next thing is interpersonal communication exists on a continuum, and some of the examples that I've already provided illustrate this well. So at the very bottom of the slide, right down here, you will see this is the impersonal end of our continuum. That means people that you're really just talking to them to get something done. And then over here, you have highly interpersonal, which is really the focus of our semester. So impersonal, taxi driver, we should put Uber driver. Nobody drives a taxi. Nobody rides in a taxi anymore. A real estate agent and a client, a doctor and a patient, your neighbors. And as we move down to this end, it becomes more interpersonal. So social role information means it's, again, not very personal information. It's just a transaction. There's social rules, right? We have to say please and thank you. There's certain people that get to talk first and other people that don't talk as often. And then there's also social messages, things that you do communicate in a social setting and things that you don't communicate in a social setting, but also some pleasantries and things like that. On the interpersonal side, we give personal information. That's the goal of interpersonal communication oftentimes, is to deliver personal information so that we can keep that connectiveness between us. There are rules. Sometimes we don't have to say please and thank you. Sometimes we can interrupt, especially in families, and that's okay. But you don't interrupt your teacher in the middle of a saying. You don't interrupt your boss in the middle of what they're saying. And then there's some personal messages. Again, our messages become more personal. We certainly divulge more things. We more frequently communicate. And so you have to keep in mind that when I'm looking for examples from you, I'm wanting examples on this end more than I am these, because these don't give us good interpersonal information. So we can't really apply a lot of the theories down at this end. Most of our theories are going to be over here on that end. All right, couple more. It involves verbal and nonverbal messages. The words we speak are only part of it. How we say it, or paralanguage, is actually a nonverbal aspect of messaging. How do we stand with our posture, our body? What are we doing with our arms? Are we gesturing? Are we making eye contact, or are we staring down? Maybe we're distracted. Non-verbally, what are you doing that influences what people think? So while somebody's delivering a verbal message, oftentimes you're giving them non-verbal feedback, and that impacts the nature of the interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication takes place in varied forms, which means we can talk face-to-face. We can text through a cell phone, or we can chat on a computer. Synchronous means it's occurring simultaneously in real time. Most of the time that is texting and face-to-face and being on the phone. But the opposite of that is asynchronous, and that means it doesn't occur in real time. So that when I send you an email, that's not real time unless you're sitting at your computer and the second it comes through, you read it. More often than not, even if you are sitting at your computer, there was a little bit of lag, and you're reading something that really was in the past, even if it was only a couple of minutes. The last thing that we need to understand about the characteristic or nature of interpersonal communication is that it involves choices. Every time we communicate and interact with somebody, we make little choices along the way. We make choices on whether or not we're going to put our cell phone down and look at somebody in the eye. We make a choice whether or not we're going to listen without judging them. We make a choice whether or not to yell or to stay calm, walk away, and maybe come back later. So there's all sorts of choices. Do you make the choice to tell somebody you're too tired to negotiate a solution to a conflict? Do you make the choice that when you're hungry or hangry, as we've come to know it, that you don't try to solve big issues in your relationship and you don't make important decisions that are going to impact that other person? Everything we do when we communicate is made up of choices. And there's some choice points that can dictate how effectively we communicate, and then on the flip side can absolutely destroy our effective communication. So we're going to explore some ways you can make some really good choices when situations arise and you need to communicate your thoughts and ideas. So that's the first section of this particular introductory unit. And I'm at 13 minutes and 6 seconds, so well within that 15-minute time span that I promised. And hopefully you've understood what interpersonal communication is and those 6 characteristics. All right, see you next video. Thanks for watching.